Today we're at the Crosby Street Hotel in New York City to talk to one of the most eminent collectors in vintage watches of the past 20 years. He's a collector of Rolex, of Patek, of Longines, of Omega, of Eberhard, of just about anything you could imagine. His name is Alfredo Paramiko, and today we're talking watches. Alfredo, thank you so much for coming here and agreeing to show us some of your collection.
Thanks to you, Ben, and I want you to know that's for me a pleasure to have the opportunity to share my passion with you and with your audience. I've been collecting watches probably since the beginning of the 90s when I started to work in investment banking business. And so with the first money, I immediately started to buy watches.
What was your first great watch?
My first watch that I was so happy to receive was a Rolex, an Explorer, because it was so difficult to get at that time. After Rolexes, I started to collect Patek Philippe on one side, and on the other side, I really got crazy for Longines.
So let's talk a little bit about some Longines. So you brought 3 of them here today.
Yeah.
What is this one?
This is to me a quite incredible watch because according to the museum, this is the only Longines ever made in a limited edition. This is called a Swissair because this watch made in 1954 was delivered to Swissair in 1956 and was given to pilots. And what is really interesting in my view is that the case, and especially I would say the shape of the crown, are typical of 1930 watches like the Lindbergh and the Wims. So in my idea, they probably had some spare cases and spare crowns, and so they made this very limited edition watch. They made just 100 watches.
And next to that, we have another oversized Longines that is arguably even more rare.
Yes, this is basically a chrono that is called the A7 because it was made for the US Army. You can see all the engravings on the back. This watch was made during the late 30s and the beginning of the 40s. The funny story about this watch is that many people thought that this was basically a converted pocket watch into a wristwatch. After many years, and also with the help of experts and connoisseurs of Longines, we finally got that this watch was really in production. You know where I found it?
Where's that?
On eBay. It's crazy.
Of course you did. And then the last Longines that you brought today is, in your opinion, one of the best.
Well, the last one, yes, absolutely. It's a watch which has been produced during the second half of the 50s. The movement is the very famous movement, the 30ZN, which is, in my view, probably the finest chrono movement ever made by any watch manufacturer. This watch is also very rare because the counter of the minute of the chrono is in the center. In Italian, we say the doppia lancetta, the double hands, which means that basically this is a center second minute hand chrono.
Another brand that we see a few of here in this selection is IWC.
Yes. Here we have what is probably, I would say, the benchmark of all the IWC production, which is the Portuguese. This is, of course, not the contemporary version. This is the version of 1940s. If you think of the proportion of this case in 1940, it's great. How contemporary the design of this watch is incredible. I had really the privilege to buy from a dealer a couple of years ago in Italy. It was the missing part of the IWC collection, which also includes an incredible Mach 9. The Mach 9 is a military watch made for the German army. There are 2 different versions of this watch. One with the logo like this, so with a long signature, and another one with the signature which is in a totally different logo. And I think this version is probably the rarest of the 2. This is the last one, which is a very nice aqua timer. This is a watch much more contemporary. It's probably on the second half of the 60s, but I really love this watch because of this dial, of the double crowns, and I also love the date with the layout and the pattern in black.
And then we move on to a brand that I particularly love, and that's Omega. And I said, I want you to bring a special Omega, and you delivered.
This is the first chrono wristwatch ever made by Omega.
That actual watch?
Absolutely. If you look at the shape and the layout of the watch, it is clear that it's probably a test. Look at the lugs, which are very, very, very little. Look at the size of the case. Looks like a pocket watch, but it's not. And also look at the button, which is not at 2, at 4, like probably 95% of Chronos, but it's here done at 6.
And then keeping on going with another brand that It's kind of interesting in the vintage sector, you just don't see that many of them, that's Brigade.
Yeah.
So this is a very special Type 20.
This is a very special Type 20 for three reasons. One, it's a military watch because it's engraved CEV. The CEV in French is the Centre d'École de Vol, which is basically the school for pilots. Second, because of the overall conditions of this watch, which are, in my view, great. And the third, another thing which is very popular nowadays, the tropical color of the dial, which is brown, and it's all brown. And if you look at the aging of the hands and the aging of the indices, they are perfectly matching.
We have a watch from Audemars Piguet that you don't see often at all. It's a chronograph.
This is one of the first chrono ever made by Audemars Piguet. Why I decided to buy this watch that was really expensive, probably one of the top prices ever paid for an Audemars Piguet chrono, it's because, first of all, of the rarity. As you said, there are not so many chrono around from Audemars Piguet from the 40s. And secondly, because of the overall conditions. It looks like being a brand new watch. And third, because it's a two-tone steel and rose gold watch.
So finally we come to a brand that is really kind of your bread and butter. It's where you spend a lot of your time.
Absolutely.
In fact, some would say you have owned some of the most important Patek Philippe's
Which
ever.
I think is true, honestly.
So what did you choose to bring here today?
I wanted to bring to your attention something which is to me cool, fancy, rare, and delicious. I think that the term is delicious. We have here three very important Calatrava. The first is a steel version of 570. The thing that comes immediately to your eyes is the two-tone dial with these incredible Brigade numbers. The overall condition of this watch is really great. In 20 years I've been collecting watches, I probably saw just a couple. And the same thing we can say for the brother. It's basically the same model, same reference, 570. But now we have this version which is in a yellow gold, and again we have the two-tone dial with the Brigade numbers, and the most important with this gilt color. And finally, here we have the pink gold case with the pink dial. In fact, here we also have the original paper of this watch, and you can see that here in the description of the dial they say le cadran est en argent. It means that the dial is in silver. And then on the extra they say which is silver but rose color, which I think is great.
Three watches that are kind of brothers and sisters to one another. And I think what some of our readers might not understand is just how important these watches are and how special they are.
To me are probably the most important time-only watches ever made by Patek Philippe. These three watches are, to me, by far rarest and more difficult to find than any 1518 in yellow gold or 2499 in yellow gold in any series. The rarity of these three watches is almost unique.
Another watch that you've almost been chasing for a little while, a few years.
Wow, absolutely.
This is a Ficero 1463 in steel.
Which is the first and probably the only waterproof chrono ever made by Patek Philippe. This watch was made in the 50s and the overall conditions are unbelievable. This watch was offered to me many years ago. At that time I just bought the 1518 in steel, so I was a bit scared and so I had to refuse, but I was really disappointed. And then I saw this watch at an auction at Christie's. The watch went in an incredible, important collection. And when I had the opportunity to buy back the watch, I was so happy. I'm very proud of this watch because I never had a very nice 1463 in steel. And this is probably the nicest I ever seen in my life.
You said all along that condition, in particular with Patek, is kind of paramount. So there's rarity, there's condition. And in terms of condition, what you look for, maybe not to wear, but to own, would be new old stock.
Absolutely.
And that means a watch that has never been worn.
Yes.
And so what do we have there?
We have here the original paper, and then here we have all the booklets, which are not very easy to find, you know, which means that probably the watch was bought by the owner and he probably never wore the watch.
No.
He just put into a safe box. The bracelet of the watch is immaculate. this watch probably has never seen a wrist.
Yeah.
And the nicest thing is, if I turn the watch, I can still see the sticker on the back.
Yeah.
And this is really the first time I see a Nautilus Jumbo in this condition.
So Alfredo, you've owned JB Champion watch, potentially one of the most valuable, unique watches there is. You've owned a 1518 in steel, you've owned all these. Is there anything out there that still you're chasing?
I don't really know if it really exists or not, but I have been told that in 1942, Patek made 3 very special 1518 in steel and pin gold, two-tone. For sure, I know that 3 cases were ordered. Then I don't know if the watches were really assembled or not. Rumors say that one watch was made for the King of Romania. Probably one day when I will be older, I will spend the rest of my life in Romania trying to chase the watch.
Nobody you know owns one, you've never seen one?
No, absolutely no. I don't really have any evidence of the existence of the watch. And so I started dreaming about the watch that probably does not even exist, you know?